Preservation Association of Lincoln Brown Bag Lecture Series. My name's Eileen Burke, and I'm the coordinator of these brown bags. The Preservation Association of Lincoln is sponsoring the taping of today's program. Our speaker today is Ed Zimmer. Ed was a historic preservation planner in Lincoln's city and county government from 1985 to 2020. Since retiring, Ed remains an active community historian and volunteer. He recently finished 2 books, the 3rd and final volume of the Near South Walking Tour book, and a book on Lincoln postcards with Jim McKee. Ed is native to Omaha and has an undergraduate degree from Lindenwood College and a PhD from Boston University. Ed's talk today is, the winner is PAL's annual awards for this year, 2025. Please join me in welcoming Ed.
Thank you. It's daunting that we're now at 32nd year, which means I can't go back and summarize all of the awards. You may feel like that in an hour, but I'm not actually going to summarize them all. The annual meeting this year was May 16th. PAL tries to pick interesting places for these annual meetings. And an historic building or a building in need of rehab, or I think they're mostly all still standing. I want to go back through the list at some point and see have we lost any of the meeting sites entirely. There are several that have been rehabbed after the meeting, which is part of how to choose a good site. A couple years ago, we met at this little industrial building on N Street that says Daniel Hill up in the date stone, but for a time was craft cheese, was automotive parts, and now has sort of been upcycled into Assemblage, an art gallery of the Duncan and LeBaron families, and an award winner in the institutional rehab category of PAL a couple of years back. This is the interior, this lovely rounded arch roof, and the Duncans and LeBarons in their space. And that 2023 was when PAL could celebrate post-COVID, getting back together again and celebrating his 30th birthday. The year after that, and there's often a wide variety in these sites, we were meeting at the Dairy House block, or what we might call Meadow Gold, or if we went back strictly to the ownership name, the Beatrice Creamery block, M to N and 7th to 8th, in a fun industrial space at the base of the windowless building that was the ice house of the original Meadow Gold project. And it was a nice venue, and we heard about the building and the project and did the awards and the business parts of the annual meeting there. Those big circular holes in the wall are where some giant tanks had been inside this building in its day. This year it was First Plymouth, the beautiful First Plymouth Congregational Church, and here is the Van Buren McGonigal and Robert McLaughlin drawing for the tower, what I think of as just barely Lincoln's second best tower. The other one's a little bigger, a little taller, a little more prominent, but what a lovely one this is as well. First Plymouth was the combination of First Congregational from 13th and L downtown, and Plymouth Congregational that has spun off from them in the teens down at 17th and A, and they rejoined up on the top of the hill into First Plymouth. National figures designing it. In fact, McGonigal had been one of the competitors for the state capitol. And I kind of imagine him seeing that Goodhue had won with his beautiful tower, thinking, I do good towers too. I didn't know Nebraska needed a tower, and he came back and built a very good tower here. There were also lovely comments. McGonigal was quite widely published in the architectural press of the day, and he published about touring the Capitol under construction and was very complimentary of Goodhue's, the late Goodhue's work on the Capitol, and said it was the most significant work of American architecture yet. Not his tower, Goodhue's tower. And this where we were privileged to meet this year, and we'll come back to this again because it was one of the award winners this year as well. And a few years back also received the Stewardship Award very properly. We met in Pilgrim Hall. Lovely space, been recently renovated, very nice meeting and assembly space. And thanks to Gordon Scholes, we have some lovely pictures of the meeting and the winners. You might consider coming to annual meetings. They're open, and there's often food as well as the awards. There's a little business meeting. This is PAL's annual meeting, and then most of the affair is something to eat and the awards. So it nourishes the soul and the body. This is the roster of the 8 awards that PAL has done. I think we've added one along the way. I think City Center wasn't there right at the beginning, but there were things that needed to be celebrated that didn't fit the rest of the list. So we'll go through these. Now look a little backwards at the last couple years and then this year's winners. So beginning with residential rehab. In 23, it was a little house that Carmen Maurer, across the street from her home, had been watching it for years. The Waynes were the loving owners of it for years and had wonderful, fascinating plants in the front yard. Wayne was a geology professor, and the house was a little changed on the inside. Carmen wanted to see it continue its single-family use and undertook a big project to get it ready for the next family, and she succeeded in that and got the Residential Rehab Award in 23. Around the corner from that, a building still in process, but we can see very clearly where it's going, and the big magnificent Fitzgerald House, where the drawings of 1902, 1903 by the architects Leach and Plim are still in the house, and were very valuable to the Westras as they were working to put back together. This had been, I think, 5 or 6 apartments on the interior. Over time, some of the elements survived. So I think on this staircase, some of the paneling was the old stuff out of the basement or the attic, but they also could then see just where it had been, and much of this was new mill work to put back in those missing features. West was a professor at the university, and he and John and Heather are doing a long, patient, beautiful job on this very important house, right across the front steps from our meeting place at First Plymouth. The award this year isn't to Phillips Castle, which it has been in the past, but instead, if we look at the site, this is a very important building. John H. W. Hawking's design, carriage house in the back still surviving, both in Colorado Redstone. And then surrounding the site and giving an impression of how major that, how much ground was under that site at the beginning, we get this iron and stone fence. Here we are on the D Street side of it. It's at 19th and D. The entrance post to one of the major entrances. And then up the street, moving west, this fence continues and encompasses the front of another lot that has been split off, a small apartment building of the 1950s. And what you can't quite see here behind the overgrowth is a tree came down on that fence in 23. And a call came to, or an email came to, I think, the PAL website of the owners requesting some advice on how do we put this back together again. A wonderful question. It's not a major feature, but it's a major site, and it really knits together that footprint and makes this sweet little apartment house fit in as, oh, this is part of that big site. Rather than being an intrusion, it kind of embraces it. PAL members had some ideas, put the owners onto the research of where they might find somebody who could rebuild this, and they do, and get it done beautifully. So that's before, that's again. So this looks like way before, but this is actually after. They did a beautiful job on it. There it is running up to the corner to the stone post on this one. And we have here Jason and Amanda Voles who are the owners and had carried out this seemingly small, but only to the scale of the house, but I think a real contribution and lovely attention to detail, and also so nice they reached out and then took it the extra steps to figure out how to get this done. So Amanda and Jason Volz got the residential rehab because it's a residential site, and they had found in town Fab 402 Fabrication, who rebuilt the fence for them. Stewardship looks at a project that isn't necessarily a new one, but in fact typically is a long-term one of a major building that's being taken good and appropriate care of. A couple of years ago, that was South Street Temple, as they were nearing their centennial year in this building, 20th and South Street. Davis and Wilson design of 1924, so they're approaching their centennial at this time. Spectacular interior with some wonderful detail. Those big bosses up in the ceiling from which the lights hang are lovingly rendered with the Stars of David. And it has, in the carved woodwork of the Ark of the Covenant, Felix Lorenz's work, the same brilliant carver who had done the Warner Chamber doors at the Capitol. And so they were the Stewardship Award in 23. And then 24, the big house on the huge lot at the northeast corner of 40th and South Streets. We would call it the Young Faulkner House. The Faulkner family had it designed by James Craddock, or the major elements. I think there was an older house there, but it got wrapped in a new house in about 1902 by James Craddock. And Monty and Kathy McKillop taking lovely care of this. Their son nominated the house and the parents for the award, and also should have been rightly grateful because he was able to have his wedding in the big yard of the house. And so this was the 24 Stewardship Award at the Young Faulkner House. This year's stewardship went to the Spidell Barn. If you've been on South 40th Street, just above Pine Lake Road, Yankee Hill Road. Yeah. There's this anomaly of a big red barn proudly declaring 1917 Spidell Farms. That had been a 200-acre farm. The barn doesn't date to 17, it's from the early 30s, when it was time to repurpose the thrust of supporting agriculture on the site, and they needed a dairy barn. And the Spidells talked their lender and the owner of the land into, if we're going to stay here, we need to be able to switch to dairy, and this is the barn that resulted, and it's been in the Spidell family ever since. And I'm grateful that Mr. Spidell is here, not the grandfather, the grandson, who has lived here for 50 years, so he would be National Register eligible as well. But beautifully maintained, beautiful site along the road, and really kind of marks for us, of course this city has grown. It shouldn't all change as it grows. There should be some landmarks, and this is exactly a landmark. It tells us what used to be on this land, and is still recognizable. The staircase up, a barn dance of the 50s. If all these people went up that staircase, you'd have to take numbers to come back out again, I think. And Steve Spidell was gracious to come to the meeting. This is PAL's president, Jeff Erb, and he'll show up in many of these views. He's the guy at the other side of the plaque, and our able and very good president who's got good computer skills and keeps us in the 21st century, and design background as well. So the Stewardship Award this year went to Steve Spidell and the barn. Commercial and institutional rehab, a big category of areas like Haymarket and schools and churches. A couple of years ago, we met at and enjoyed Sky Park Manor, just a block off the Capitol. Selmer Soldheim's design that John Sampson had picked up and undertook a massive project to put it in modern condition and a good residential property again. Fun place, fun to tour through. We actually had the meeting in the parking garage, which worked just fine because it was just prior to the building filling up and we could use the parking garage for that use. This is the lobby, looking very mid-century. Last year it was Everett School, a Davis and Wilson, Davis on the left, Walter Wilson on the right, design of the late 1920s. One of the early junior high schools in Lincoln, replacing one of the 1880s elementary schools in an earlier building on the site. In the 1990s, it flipped back to elementary use, switching missions with Park School over at 8th and F, which became the middle school, and this became an elementary again. But it's almost disappearing behind the vegetation. It's got nothing but steps and steps and more steps to the front door, and the windows reflect the energy crisis of the 70s. It's like wearing sunglasses and you can't really see its eyes. The project put it on modern geothermal heating and cooling, put windows in of a design and a color that match much more closely the original scale and look of the building, and then a symmetrical, you don't have to build a ramp on both sides, but this building demands symmetry and got symmetry in its staircase and ramping system, and looks like a building that does important work every day of the school year again. And so the award went to LPS and the project team in '24 for that. And there have been several, PAL had recognized several school projects over the years as some of these rehabs took place. Institutional rehab this year was not a full rehab because it didn't need it. They'd won a stewardship award some years back at First Plymouth. But look again at the beautiful staircase from the steps from the sidewalk up to the front courtyard and the floor level of the sanctuary. You'd only have to climb 10 steps, perhaps, from the sidewalk. You could rest in the middle, but you couldn't get up unless you were able to climb those steps. A postcard showing the same, and people pouring out across those steps. Late 50s, maybe, somewhere around in there. We need a gearhead who can look at that little piece of car and tell me the year of the car. So beautiful church, beautifully maintained. There'd been a rehab on the steps. They were in good condition, but accessible not a bit. So a pathways project was designed, a better name than just say ramps. This was the pathway project to sweep up from the sidewalk, because the hills going down really was not suitable for the kind of solution at Everett where you could go from both sides, but they needed to use both sides of the front to get to the full level and put it in place. The principal designers were Clark and Enerson. And it's a subtle, important, not invisible, but so subtly designed, it sort of disappears just by the colors and the lightness of the work. So that as you approach it, you don't think, what happened to the front of this building? You think, I know how to get in, either by the stairs or the ramp. It all works beautifully from every angle. There's a columbarium off on the right side, so this brings people up to that level as well, and up to the courtyard and sanctuary level. And there's something about First Plymouth, they always seem to have able architects within the membership. So the representatives for this project happen to be Lowell Berg, retired but not really, from Clark and Enerson, and Wynn Melhoff from formerly Davis Design, and again, our Jeff Erb. And not everybody notices right away that there's a peacock on the front of First Plymouth, but there is. And everybody at the meeting would probably know, because in addition to having the meeting there, Wynn gave a nice tour around the building and of the courtyard. And the peacock's to the left of the rose window, and it's a phoenix to the right of the rose window. The lovely thing about this terracotta work, like the colors of the brick wall itself, that's permanent color burned into the terracotta, and so we know those are the colors that were chosen and that will stay there as long as it's about the most permanent form of color you can put on a building is glazed terracotta. The tour included the courtyard and the magnificent sanctuary. Integration of old and new is often a smaller piece, although sometimes we've found major projects like the Kindler Hotel joining to the former Lincoln Commercial Club. That was a 23 award winner, and the massive project of putting back into beautiful condition the dining room / ballroom of the Lincoln Commercial Club. This was Davis and Berlinghoff work of about 1911-12 in the original construction, and the Commercial Club became the Chamber of Commerce. It was a direct antecedent to the Chamber of Commerce. This was the chamber building in the early teens of the 20th century, declaring this is a big city, this is boosterism rendered into architecture, and beautifully. And makes a great banquet hall, meeting place, event space today. And can you imagine, those windows were all blanked out for quite a few decades in the third quarter of the 20th century or so. But there is the Kindler beside the Commercial Club. This year's old and new literally was old and new, but on the old building a new piece happened as well. This is in Piedmont at 915 Fall Creek Road, and is focusing on the 1931 building up the driveway. This was the Davis and Wilson for some of the officers of Stewart Investment Company who were developing Piedmont. This is the mid-century ranch house beside it, which is, there are lots of post-World War II construction in Piedmont, as well as the 1925 to 45 construction that began the place. And this was the big, huge project that family in the 31 building, the Hofschneiders, needed a bigger garage. Undertook a very ambitious project that included buying the house beside them, replatting the two so they could move a little bit of the land from the north house to the south house, because they didn't have enough separation between them otherwise. So they moved a lot line, which takes a lot of paperwork, and they had the space, they just had to reallocate it. And that is the addition, very sympathetic. And they also put the neighboring house into first-rate condition as well as they finished up the project. So we got two for, I don't know the budget, so I don't want to say two for the price of one. But for the walking by, we have two great Piedmont houses in beautiful condition for family use. And this is Kelly and Angela Hofschneider and our Jeff. (909) and 915 Fall Creek Road. Great Commoner Award is PAL's Preservation Education Award, because that's really been a main thread of PAL through the years. We could also call this the Eileen Burkt Award, because she's carried on the brown bags from the beginning. Remarkable achievement to keep this monthly educational outreach going that long, and I think it only gets better. Education's kind of like that because we're never going to get done. It's an ongoing effort. In 23, Frank Ordia, a board member of PAL and an instructor at the College of Architecture, was bringing in a new generation of preservationists through his classes and received the award. And then next year, our original local historian, Jim McKee, with his complete preservation education, a little series that I think was going to run 12 or 15 that now I think is in the 40s, that Jim's complete history will never be complete, and we like it that way. He even gave presentations with just one wing when he was in a sling on his right arm. So this was program 36, and this was 3 years ago. So we're way beyond that now. This year we recognized 1011's local kind of magazine program here in Nebraska that John and Taryn Vandefort have been doing for years, and often their emphasis is either Lincoln or statewide local history, and often important buildings around the state that we might know well or we might have never seen before. Fairview was featured. Down in Richardson County, the beautiful courthouse, and they do lovely camera work. They take you inside, emphasize the key features, takes you around the state from your living room. Some of the features of that courthouse. This is a Gernand design, Omaha architect who also did Bethany School in Lincoln and Havelock High School and courthouses around the state. Mural. Back to their desk. Down to Pawnee County. We have a board member named Keith Dubois. This, I think, is probably Du Bois. Down in Pawnee County, where they visited the ZCBJ, Czech Ethnic Fraternal Order Hall. This still is in beautiful condition, has its original curtains, backdrops, and they gave a visit there. And they came to the meeting and received their award for a really nice ongoing program that gets the message out on the commercial airwaves as well as our government access airwaves. City Center Award looks at any broad range of activity or building or business that enlivens the community and keeps not just downtown, but the whole older city a lively place and a desirable place. So in 23, it was not the mill, but the mills, as we were up to 4 major locations by 23, from the original one in Haymarket to Telegraph District to Prescott and College View, and the one out at Innovation Campus in all new construction, the others all in older buildings, but all of them enliven the place around them, and then they go further with outreach of concerts, and it's not only it's not 24/7, but it is 365, or virtually 365, that this is a place people from all over the community and all ages gather and are comfortable. And Dan and Tamara came for the award in 23. In 24, just around the corner from one of their locations at Telegraph District in the old LT&T warehouse, Open Harvest had found a new home and brought their lovely grocery store to really bring fresh and wholesome food that was not easy in reach for downtown residents, as that becomes more and more of the population, and they did a great job moving there. It's not so much the building, although it's a nice building, an interesting building, but it's bringing an important use down to the city center. This year, we I think, got more innovative yet in recognizing a program of the university, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, continuing education for, I think, 55, I think it's 50 plus is their description. OLLI, what they CALL OLLI by its initials, is a national program. This is a strong branch of it in Lincoln. Housed at the University of Nebraska. I believe it's now a membership of 1,500 or a couple thousand signed up 5 terms a year, hundreds of classes. It happens, I'm in several of these because I give OLLI classes, but they have dozens and hundreds of instructors. They don't all have a publicist like I have with a great camera. But I really admired that during COVID, when they couldn't be operating from classrooms, we did outdoor classes in Wyuka and in Near South. We carried that on then when we could go back into classrooms with joint classroom and open air on Sheridan Boulevard. Would do an opening lecture and then walk one half of the boulevard on the subsequent week and the second half of the boulevard on the next week. And lots of people signed up for that one. I think we filled the auditorium, and I think we did it twice. And then also coming out of COVID, established themselves as a in-house and remote learning with good facilities for being able to reach out, and now have participation from a couple dozen states in their program. So we were glad to have Patricia Saldana, who is the communication associate, marketing and communication associate for OLLI, come to the meeting and receive the award from Jeff. I didn't know I was going to be the cover boy on this one. This was a Near South tour that the next catalog came out, and oh, was there a photographer along on that tour? I'm distracted during tours. PAL President's Award is whatever the PAL President wants it to be. Often it's an individual who's made a contribution to the organization. Sometimes it's an organization. Sometimes it's the City TV crew who used to have to travel over to the Historical Society building with their truck and set up there for years. And now we televise right from their studio. In '23, the award went to a remarkable group of former state legislators who still cared about the Capitol, cared about the state and the affairs of government, and decided to fundraise for the improvement of the courtyards, the unfinished courtyards at the Capitol. The state was investing in putting fountains back in, but the courtyards really rely on the landscape to be the places they're supposed to be. And they did major fundraising to put the courtyards into gorgeous condition with 4 fountains, low basin fountains, and beautiful courtyard spaces. Lovely to look at from above, lovely to take 12 4-year-olds into and station one person at the only door they can get out of, and they can run around on the paths, having been instructed by reading the note on the door not to go off the paths and not to play in the water. But they can run, and it's a lovely space, probably specifically designed by Goodhue for 4-year-olds. It's pretty clear. So the Nebraska Association of Former State Legislators got the award in '23. And then our friendly realtor, Greg McCowan, who has a good eye for historic properties, and especially ones PAL might like to have an event in. And a couple years ago, we had one at McAfee House. Greg is such a comfortable realtor, he can convince someone who hasn't yet sold their house to allow PAL to schedule an event, and then even after it's been sold, convince them and the buyer it'll really still be okay, because you have to catch it in that moment, and the moment can pass in a phone call. But Greg got us in, and he's done it more than once, and it's been a very nice, typically members-only event for PAL to get into some special places. So we had a nice visit to McAfee House and that spectacular, virtually 2-story living room. So Greg's been a good friend. This year, it was this wonderful building, but not the building, but the wonderful contents of the main floor, the Francie and Finch bookstore in the Nebraska Telephone Building on South 13th Street. I think it's our only standing Thomas Rogers Kimball design building in Lincoln. He had one at the university. It's gone, but a lovely little building of Nebraska Telephone. Before the Woodses founded Lincoln Telephone, bought it, and so the Woods building is right beside the old telephone building. And this is Leslie Huerta. I'm Huerta. All of the vowels count. This is Leslie Huerta at her very friendly, very pretty, very accommodating bookstore. If you've got a 8-year-old with a birthday coming up, the books may not be on the shelf, but they can get them, and they'll call you as soon as they come in, and they'll have them before the party. They also sponsored authors' book signings and events. Here, Jim and I are presenting, I think, the postcard book at the bookstore. They carry the Near South tour books just as a gift to Near South because they don't have a price on them that anybody can make money on. So the proceeds go directly back to Near South. But I also can bring guests in, and when I step in, they say, would you like to sign a few more books? It's nothing quite like having visitors come to town and you step into a bookstore and you get to sign books. It's a cheap trick, but it's really soul-warming. So Leslie was kind and came to the event as well. Huerta is easy to say. I just need to see it in front of me. And then finally, the Lifetime Achievement Award for PAL is the Helen Busalis Award. Our longtime city council member, first woman mayor of Lincoln for 2 terms, very active in historic preservation. It was under her terms that the preservation ordinance was passed in Lincoln. She was a trustee of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And after her service as mayor, one of the real compliments I could get when I joined the city the next year was, you would have really liked working for Helen. That was a kind thing to say to me and a compliment to her. And she would call me up and tell me there needs to be a preservation group. I would say, yes, Mrs. Mayor, there does need to be a preservation group, and it needs to be a private group separate from the city. And then she would call again and again until I had to help set up the group because she was not going to leave it alone. Part of it was we could then ask her, may we put your name on the award? All we want is your very good name. And she said yes. And the next year she called up to say, how much am I giving per year for that award? And every year after, she gave a significant gift to PAL, which was not what we had asked for. We just asked for her good name. And in 23, it was Mr. Capital, Bob Ripley, receiving the award. And in 24, a longtime Haymarket volunteer who particularly was active in Historic Haymarket, Inc., the business group, but also the specific projects to create housing in the warehouses, like the Hardy, and this is the Granger, putting significant housing in the district, which I think has really changed the feel. When there are people living there, that's a major shift from a place that's only a 9 to 5 Monday, Friday district. And this is so much more than 9 to 5 Monday, Friday. And then Larry Small, active in Haymarket from its first days, also has made community contributions like funding the beautiful Ben Victor statue on Centennial Mall of Dr. Susan LaFlèche Picotte. And so Larry continues to to brighten our community and the history of our community. This year, another retiree who had been at meetings, in fact, this is, I think, Scott Wieskamp at the 24 meeting, where he was able to attend, but he had a family parents' anniversary event at the time of our meeting this year. So this is Eileen giving him the thumbs up at a preceding meeting, and you'll see this picture again, sort of. Scott was honored for a career of 2 decades improving the infrastructure, the appearance, the stability, the economy of Lincoln Public Schools. We estimate about $1 billion worth of construction in his years. Took the district from something like 5 million square feet to 8 million square feet. LPS operates the largest square footage of geothermal supported heating and cooling, we think, in the country, at the all the buildings and all. So thousands of wells, pin cushioning the city, supporting the heating and cooling of these buildings, and magnificent buildings they are. Lincoln High, with its Ted Sorensen Theater, and coming with design solutions using the skills of the professional community, of course, but supervised and directed out of what became called the operations department of the schools, taking this Davis and Berlinghoff coffered ceiling, cutting out the panels to get the grid work above for the lighting positions and all the things you wanted in a high school, sophisticated high school theater program, but still keeping the appearance of that beautiful ceiling, including those pendant lights. Or a school like Hartley at 33rd and Vine, a Fisk and McGinnis of 1920. Easy to read, the old building. Where do you put a gym on this that doesn't look like something accidental and awful? And a gym is just a big brick box. Well, if that brick box has a little bit of, is set back and has a little bit of relief of nice brickwork, you still read the old building very clearly, and you've got the gym you needed for program. So all of these kinds of good design choices and a career of supporting this LPS is a city center support. You won't have good neighborhoods without good schools. Since he couldn't come, we recruited Kurt Donaldson, former city council member, landlord, community advocate for smart energy use, who serves and has served before Scott was hired on LPS's construction review committee. Ripley and I happened to be on that committee as well, so we persuaded Scott to come, or Kurt to come and receive the plaque. This is him making a final comment that we had taped or phone videoed Kurt's comments about Scott so we could give them to Scott after the meeting. And we got to the end and Kurt said, but I forgot to say, and this is him saying, and that $1 billion of work was all delivered on time and under budget. And that's unheard of. So that's him saying, that's unheard of. And you can hear him saying that, can't you? So thanks to Kurt for standing in for Scott, and Scott was very pleased at that as well, LPS Director of Operations. And I figured out how to put the plaque in his hands for the Busalis Award. There's Busalis on the plaque. It's a photo image. It's a fake. It's an obvious fake. This was the group from a very good annual meeting in May of 2025. And with that, I don't know that we typically get a lot of questions out of these and the winner is meetings. You can see the good work that Gordon does for us in putting these together. And I do have a question here, and we have a roving microphone to make you audible.
When was the gym for 33rd and Vine built?
The gymnasium was added to Hartley School in about 2000 or 2005. It's quite recent. It's part of. I could look it up, but I don't have that much command of all the school dates. But it is part of the recent generations of additions.
It does look very fitting.
It
Blends in very nice.
Yeah, I think it's a very nice, and some of PAL's recognition of LPS work, Riley School was one that got an award back about the early in the program, so it's probably about the 90s. And Riley's a 1950s school building, but needed a gym addition, and is a very different feel. Each school kind of reflects its origin era, and what was put on there was fitting for that building, and it was honored for an architectural sensitivity to the age and date and character of the building. Materials is one of the keys, but also some of the detailing and where you put it on the site. So those were all things we wanted to recognize and have repeatedly, but this was a career that has made a major contribution, and that's what Basalis tries to recognize, the Basalis Award. I think we're about done then. Thank you for coming. It's much easier to do this when you have faces to look out to, and thanks to all the award winners in particular.